Hey nerds, what's up? Today I'm going to go over my New Year's goals for 2021, partly for accountability for myself and partly to talk to you guys about some books that I normally don't get to talk about on this channel. And then I will also go into my 2022 reading goals as well as some stuff you can expect on the channel next year. See you after the jump. My number 1 and 2 goals of last year kind of ended up overlapping in the books I read, so I'm going to talk about them at the same time. My first goal was to read some well-read books, and that basically just means classics or other books that are kind of in our general cultural knowledge base, things that get referenced a lot. I never think someone should have to read classics, that's not who I am, but I do enjoy kind of having that extra knowledge. So that was one of my goals. The second goal was to read some of my friends' favorite books. I tend to give recommendations a lot and have people read my favorite books, but don't always read other people's favorite books. And some of my friends have very different reading tastes than me and don't always read just fantasy, so it helped broaden my horizons a little bit. The first book was The Count of Monte Cristo. Now, this book was recommended by my friend Kari as one book that she really enjoyed and also definitely fits in the category of being well read. I read the unabridged version of The Count of Monte Cristo and it was very long. There were definitely parts that got a little rough for me as it took a long time. But overall, I really enjoyed this book. I think I ended up giving it a 4 out of 5 stars. I really enjoyed the narrative that ended up being weaved in it. And so it was definitely a classic I actually truly enjoyed, and I can understand why its themes resonate so much today. Now, I had never actually seen the movie, which I know is a very popular movie, so I watched that after reading the book, which was very fun. The movie is very good, just a totally different animal than the book. I feel like they're kind of two separate things. There are significant changes in the movie from the book, which I won't spoil, but I did enjoy it, particularly the movie ending, which felt a little happier than the book ending, but I like them both as separate entities. The one thing I did appreciate a lot more about the book, in my opinion, is that, there's so many pages that the revenge plot is really intricate. It's really detailed, and watching all the pieces slowly come together and then it drop is extremely satisfying and extremely interesting, and in the movie, the revenge happens just like so quick that you kind of miss out on that. So I think they're their own animals, but I really enjoyed reading that. The next book I read was Alice's Adventures in Wonderland and Alice Through the Looking Glass by Lewis Carroll. And I read this as a part of just being well read. I picked it up at the store. I talked about this a little bit in my History of Fantasy reading list, but I really enjoyed this book way more than I was expecting. I kind of knew it was a children's book. I just thought it would be, weird or whatever. I never really loved the Disney movie as a kid. It freaked me out. So I was blown away by how creative and just fun and lighthearted this book was. Definitely something I'm keeping on my shelf and I can't wait to read with my kids in a couple of years. I also was just blown away by how many references we know from Alice in Wonderland, like how many things it put into our cultural vernacular. So even for that reason alone, I'm so glad I read it. But yeah, this is a really easy, short read. So if you've ever been interested in it, I highly recommend you picking it up. Next up, Jane Eyre. Now I read this because it's been my sister's favorite book for literally ever, and for some reason I've just never read it. It also really works with well read, as obviously a very famous classic. I mean, maybe one of the reasons I avoided it is like the literal plot of it is a really young girl with a grumpy old man, which as you guys know is my least favorite plot point. And I did hate it in this. I absolutely loathed it. I even at one point texted my sister and was like, so are you ever gonna forgive me if I just like hate Jane Eyre? But I will say it kind of won me over in the end. It wasn't like my favorite, but the character of Jane Eyre herself, I really couldn't help but come to love and appreciate so much. And I definitely think she's probably one of my more loved, classic heroine that I've read. So I understand why she's captured the heart of so many people. And I also think I would have really enjoyed this book when I was a little younger, which is kind of, I think, when a lot of people end up reading it. So overall, I'm super glad I read it. Did I like the romance? Obviously not. But overall, I'm glad that I read it, even if it wasn't my favorite. Next up, My Lady Jane, which was recommended by my friend Valerie. Now, this book is a little bit out of my wheelhouse. It was kind of like a YA romance, and my friend Valerie really recommended that I listen to this through audio. She said, even though she knows I don't like audio, like the narrator really brings it to life. I will say for this book, I am super happy I did that. Usually I'm very neutral to hate on audio narrators whenever I read an audiobook, but this person really brought it to life. They did such a good job of really getting the humor of the novel, and so this was a really fun read. Wasn't my favorite, no. It ended up feeling a little juvenile at the end for my taste that I usually read. Again, I don't really read romance and I don't really read YA stuff, so I think I just wasn't the target audience. It was still funny. I still enjoyed it. It was a light read. If you like fun YA, humorous, like romance stuff, you will love this, so I highly recommend it if that's kind of your thing. Finally, the last one in this category was East of Eden by John Steinbeck, which was recommended as my friend Joy's favorite book. She has a literature degree, so I'm not surprised that a book like this is one of her favorite books. Now, this also really fits well in my well-read category since East of Eden is a very famous classic. I was blown away by this book. I was super surprised. Again, it was another long one. Again, there were times where things were like a little slow, a little boring, but the end of the book absolutely blew me away. I was on such a wild ride. I just felt so much for the characters. I felt like I was there and I was watching this tragedy unfold, and it was just really good. Now, I have read a decent amount of John Steinbeck because he is my mom's favorite author. So I was surprised to read East of Eden and realize it really unseated all of the other previous Steinbeck works I had read. So if you already like Steinbeck or if you kind of heard about this book, I really recommend it. I was really blown away, and especially like just the last line of the book. Like the book ended and I was like, what just happened? And whenever a book can like get that sort of emotion in me, I can't help but love it. Overall, I could have probably done better in those categories. I didn't read a ton of well-read books this year, but that's okay. We can just try again next year. But of the ones I read, I almost liked all of them. So in that way, it was a really good year, and I'm really glad I kind of got out of my comfort zone and read some of the books my friends like. My third goal was to read more magical realism this year, and I failed at this goal, so oops. I had good intentions, but I only ended up getting like 2 books done, but I can carry this over as well. The first book I read was 100 Years of Solitude, which is an extremely famous magical realism book. So many people say it's one of their favorite books of all time. It's on every list about magical realism. I was super excited to dive into this one. I did struggle with this a lot. I struggled with it because I didn't realize how much knowledge I needed to understand this book. You need some significant knowledge of Latin American history, specifically Colombian history, that I just did not have. So a lot of the magical realism and metaphors and important events in this book were things I just didn't have context for. So after I read the book and was like, I did a bunch of research, a bunch of study guides, and once I started understanding what the author was trying to do, I understood why it's considered such a giant success in literary fiction, why it's this monolith that we all talk about. I wish I had done the research earlier. I wish when I was feeling confused about the book, I had done that earlier. So my recommendation to you, if you don't know or are not connected to that Latin American history in some way, to read the book with a study guide or a companion, because I think this is a book that you need that context to fully appreciate. The last one I'm going to read this year is The Snow Child. I'm filming this in November. I am going to read The Snow Child before the end of the year. I promise. So I had picked that one because one of my favorite winter themed kids book was The Snow Child as a kid. I still have it. My kids have my version. And so to know that there's a magical realism novel based on that, I thought was really cool. I'm very excited to read it. It's won a lot of awards. Hey, future bookborn here. So I actually did end up reading The Snow Child before I posted this video. I actually really loved The Snow Child. It was an excellent book, fulfilled all of my expectations, and was related to the original children's book in such a nice way. I really recommend it if you are connected to that book at all or are interested in themes of loss and parenthood and friendship. It is a heavy and sad book, so just a warning there, but I really, really enjoyed it. I kind of failed this New Year's goals. Oh well, next year. My last goal was to start my reread of The Wheel of Time, and I succeeded at this one. My only goal was to get through Eye of the World, and I ended up reading Eye of the World, The Great Hunt, and The Dragon Reborn. So that was super fun. I really have enjoyed rereading them. I will continue my reread into next year. I don't know if I'm gonna do all 14, but I'll probably read 1 or 2. And yeah, so I did that. I feel good about that one. Okay, so I did okay on my goals last year. Not terrible. I at least read some of each category, so I appreciate that. Now, if just in case you're new and you haven't watched my previous videos, I make New Year's goals to stretch myself usually and to try to read things I wouldn't normally read. That's my goal with my New Year's goals. I will never set a number because I am just not interested in trying to read as much as possible. In fact, this year, I feel like I almost read a little too much. There were times I was pushing myself to read. It was my first really full year entrenched in BookTube, and there were times where I felt like I need to catch up and stay with everybody else, and I don't ever love the feeling that I have to read. I want to read because I love to read. So definitely not gonna set a number. In fact, I would be totally fine and happy if I maybe read a little bit less next year, which I know is weird. I also like to keep my New Year's goals pretty light because I wanna keep a lot open to give myself the opportunity to mood read because I am a mood reader. And you know, last year I ended up participating in a lot of things I wasn't expecting to participate in, like SPFBO. That was an added 6 books to my year, which for me is a lot. So I don't read as much as most booktubers or even some people in the book community. I read about maybe 4 books a month. So adding 6 books is a lot to add to my year. So that being said, let's get into my goals for this year. My first goal is to read Discworld. Now, I don't mean I'm gonna read all 30 or whatever, how many books of Discworld there are, but I've already read 6. I've loved every Discworld novel I have read, but the problem is because they're mostly all standalone, it's too easy to push them off to the side when I get distracted by other things. And I enjoy them and I want to read more Discworld, so I am just making it a New Year's goal. Like, I am gonna focus on Discworld this year. I'm gonna make significant progress in Discworld. Number 2, start on my History of Fantasy reading list. This is going to kind of take the place of the well-read one last year. I want to read classics. I like to have that in my background. So this year I'm gonna focus on those fantasy classics I specifically pointed out in my History of Fantasy video and read hopefully half of those. Maybe I'll get to all of them. I really love knowing where our genre started and those elements that are still showing up today. So I'm really excited to get to some of this list. And finally, my last goal is to read the Hugo Award winners. Now, obviously the Hugos have been going on for a long time. So again, I won't read like every winner, but I had read last year all the SPFBO winners with my friend AJ, and we had so much fun reading one of those a month that we decided in 2022 we were going to start reading 1 Hugo book a month just until we got bored of doing it. So we're gonna start with the newest Hugo winner, which I think is coming out in December, so we don't even know what it is yet, and then work our way backwards. He's read a few of them, I read a few of them, so we'll kind of skip around, or he'll read one that I've read while I'm reading one that he's read. But I'm actually really excited about this because I think it's interesting to see what's being awarded. And I haven't read as many as I expected. I think I've only read 4 or maybe 5 Hugo Award winners in the whole span of the Hugos. So I'm extremely interested to kind of see if I like them, how I feel about them. Yeah, it'll be interesting. I'm hoping these New Year's goals will keep the year pretty open for me. Like I said, I'm a mood reader. I really hate having to have things planned out in advance, and I want to leave a lot open. Like, I even just realized I read all the SPFBO winners last year. Like, once I got into that, I want to be able to have time to just jump in on buddy reads. Next year, I already have some buddy reads planned with other booktubers. Leanna and I of Leanna's Library are going to do a TBR swap in March where she picks 4 books for me to read and I pick 4 books for her to read. I'm really excited to do some fun stuff like that. Let me know what your New Year's goals are this year. I'm always interested to kind of maybe pick up some more reading goals if some of them seem nice, how you did on your reading goals last year, or if any of my 3 reading goals are interesting to you, I'd love for you to join me. Like, we could talk about it on Instagram and read some books together if they correlate with those. So let me know in the comments below. And as always, the best way to support me is by subscribing. And if you want to see what I'm currently reading or other nerdy rants, you can check me out on Instagram at bookborn.reviews. I'll see you next time. Bye.